big book. This is the DSM-5, where we mental health professionals, what we mental health professionals use to make a diagnosis. And you know what? When kids are struggling or having difficulties with problem behaviors and things like that, we often look in here when parents bring them to us. But believe it or not, everything that your kid does, it's not necessarily in here. More on that later. Hi everyone, this is Dr. Brett Pierce coming at you with, I guess, a little bit of an educational video. So for those of you who are new to my channel, I am a practicing child psychologist in Salt Lake City. And today I would like to talk with you about why everything that goes on with your kid, even if it's a problem, well, it doesn't necessarily mean that it relates with some kind of official mental health diagnosis like you might find in this book here. But before we dive into that, it is indeed time for the 3 T's. So, T number 1, in my awesome and highly professional and mature SpongeBob SquarePants mug. In fact, there's 2 faces on here, you know, hey. Why not? So we're having some Moroccan mint tea today, which I love. It is very good. Tea number 2 is the toy, and I thought I would show off this really super awesome Locutus of Borg toy I have. Yes, from Star Trek The Next Generation and all that. So I'd say I'm revealing how nerdy I am, but come on, look around, you know. It's a drop in the bucket. And then finally, the 3rd T for today is the talk. And the talk today is about how not everything that goes on with your kid has to do with a diagnosis. And the reason that I bring this up is because I spend a lot of time with parents who, understandably, are looking for explanations for things. And I believe in mental health diagnosis. I am indeed a mental health diagnostician for kids. It's a lot of what I do. I have taught mental health diagnosis at the graduate level. I have led formal workshops for other professionals on the subject. However, not everything that goes on with people, including kids, has to do with a diagnosis. In fact, there's a formal term for this. I think I've heard it referred to as diagnostic overshadowing. I guess the question is, why should you care, you viewers out there? Well, here's why. There's lots of other factors in behavior for kids as well as adults other than psychopathology, to be frank. So a couple of common scenarios that I run into are, number 1, intelligence. Intelligence can be a really big factor, and kids who are quite smart very often operate differently from other kids and can, have a difficult time relating with their peers. So another one that we'll talk about here in a bit is just personality. And there's all kinds of different things that we could talk about there, but general personality characteristics, like, are you introverted or extroverted? Are you someone who's very free-spirited and adventurous and kind of hyperactive? Or are you someone who's more meticulous and even and a little bit kind of more concerned about structure and order, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And sometimes personality, as well as kind of personality clashes, can be a really big and important factor. So let's dive into those into more detail. Number 1, intelligence. So the fact is, the smarter you are, statistically speaking, the weirder you are, the more unusual you are. Really, it's true. For example, if you took a kid who's, say, in the top 5% of her peers in terms of intelligence, then, gonna have a hard time relating with many other kids. Smart kids often run into a lot of difficulties. They can have a hard time relating with their peers. Smart kids, it doesn't mean that everything about them is intellectual per se, but they very often want to talk about and, have fun with things that maybe their peers don't necessarily understand or aren't necessarily as into, and so that can make them feel rather different. Now, can this cause a problem? Sure, absolutely. Is it about a diagnosis? No, not really. It's about an aspect of psychology, frankly, that doesn't have to do with pathology and therefore diagnosis per se. And so I run into that a lot. I'll run into teenagers who are very bright and want to have political discussions with their peers or something like that. And their peers are going, no, we want to gossip about Facebook. There's nothing wrong with gossiping about Facebook. There's nothing wrong with political discussions. But you could see how that might make it difficult for that particular teenager to relate. And very often, when parents are kind of struggling and with what's going on with their kids and kind of feel bad about it, which is understandable, it's easy for them to reach for kind of investing in, oh, my kid has a diagnosis because of that, or everything must be about a diagnosis or something. So the second area that I usually run into where folks mistake non-pathology for something diagnostic, I should say, is personality. Now, personality styles, there's all kinds of ways of understanding this. There can be all kinds of different types of personalities, and we could spend a long time talking about this in a lot of detail. But let's just talk about some common characteristics of personality. So you've got things like being conscientious or relaxed. You've got things about being kind of, a little more neurotic or free-spirited. You've got being extroverted or introverted. You've got people who are really emotional and passionate and creative versus people who are more kind of cerebral and detached. All of those things are fine. There's nothing right or wrong about them. There can be healthy and not so healthy versions of everything. But those things don't automatically point to a diagnosis. So one example is, I often run into situations where kids are more kind of concerned with order and everything being done in a certain right way. And parents very often go, oh my gosh, therefore my kid has OCD. And it can be annoying sometimes if there's a difference in opinion of how to do things the right way. But that, again, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's some pathology going on. Another one that I run into is when you have an introverted parent who has an extroverted kid. And extroverted kids are very often really, really, really energetic. They want to interact constantly. They need a lot of input and stimulation, particularly from others. And understandably, introverted parents are going, oh my gosh, I'm overwhelmed, I'm annoyed, I need some space. And so there can be kind of an issue there for sure. And that's important to sort out. I'm not saying, oh, that's a non-issue, get over it. I mean, it definitely can be something to sort out, but it doesn't necessarily point to a diagnosis for your kid. So what's the point of this video? Well, just be open to understanding that not everything is about a diagnosis. Not everything is pathology, even when there's a problem when it comes to kids' feelings and behavior. And so it's good to just be open to that, because usually when folks are doing research on the Googles, which always makes me a little nervous, it's understandable to do, but it does make me nervous. People aren't Googling like intelligence and its effect on kids' behavior, introversion and its effect on kids' behavior. What they're doing is Googling symptoms of autism, symptoms of OCD, symptoms of, oppositional defiant disorder, symptoms of bipolar disorder. And so there's a little bit of a tendency to automatically reach for pathology as being kind of the first and foremost explanation for things. And so, we can kind of run into problems when we do that. So at any rate, thank you for listening. This is Dr. Brett Pierce, child psychologist, about to sign out. I hope everyone is staying safe out there during these important and intense times. Frankly, I think our history as the human race. At any rate, I've talked a little bit about that in some previous videos, so we'll try to keep this one a little bit light. So please take care and stay safe, and thank you for listening. This is Dr. Brett Pierce, signing off.